On today's Locked On Jayhawks, who are going to be the best and worst defenders on this KU basketball team in 2023 to 2024? And we'll finish things off. KU starting their Puerto Rico trip coming up in a few days. Things to watch out for, things that we're going to be watching and interested in for those 3 games down in Puerto Rico.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Me as well, Monday through Friday from 3 to 6 p.m. on KLWN in Lawrence with Rock Chalk Sports Talk. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get any of your podcasts. Thank you to all the everydayers out there tuning in to all the shows. You can also find us on our YouTube page. Like and subscribe to the show. We'll get back to Monday through Friday episodes starting next week, once a day. So those everydayers will really be profiting there with some of that after a bit of off-season talk here. Today's episode, who's going to be KU's best and worst defenders on this team, and the biggest things I'm going to be looking out for, and that might be biggest takeaways that we can have from KU's trip to Puerto Rico at the beginning of August with 3 games they're set to play. Let's start with the conversation on the best and worst defenders, completing our series that we've talked about. If you missed it, we had a conversation about who will be the leading scorer, who will be second on the team, who will be the leading rebounder, passing players, and who will be second in both those regards. Will KU be a good passing and rebounding team on a couple previous episodes here with Locked On Jayhawks? The defensive ball will be very interesting for this team overall. You start with having DeJuan Harris and Kevin McCullough and Bill Self as your head coach. You feel like the insulation, the start of a great defense is there based on some of what KU has. But who will be the best individual defenders? I think you just start right there. And it's hard to pick anyone outside of DeJuan Harris or Kevin McCullough. Now, in terms of who won the award, Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, DeJuan Harris would be the guy that you would go with who wins that award. I was one of those people who actually argued that Kevin McCullough was KU's best defender last year. And it's not a knock against DeJuan Harris. DeJuan's excellent on the defensive end of the floor. I just thought that with Kevin McCullough, you not just get great defense like you're getting with DeJuan. You not just get somebody who's really good at stripping the ball away and, making chaotic plays. But with Kevin, you also get the blocks. And with Kevin, you also get more positional versatility. DeJuan's going to fight you if he's on a bigger player. But with Kevin, you can realistically feel good about him guarding 2 through 4. And if he gets switched onto a point guard, you're going to be like, okay, if he gets switched onto a center, he's going to battle his butt off and still have good length. He could come away with one of those strip plays where he kind of grabs it and he's falling back and then saves it in bounds. With DeJuan, you have a little less positional versatility with him being a point guard, to where I thought Kevin McCullough, and you look at how many plays that Kevin McCullough made to make up for somebody making a mistake, and how many clutch defensive plays, the Oklahoma State game, the Texas Tech game, that come to mind where he made big plays down the stretch, that to me, Kevin McCullough was the best defensive player in the Big 12 and on KU last season. But again, I was fine with DeJuan Harris being the guy because he was probably, to me, number 2 in those categories. And I think if you're just looking at like DeJuan Harris versus point guards, Kevin McCullough versus small forwards, okay, I could understand taking DeJuan Harris there. Kevin McCullough, though, because of the positional versatility, that's why I'm taking Kevin. Now, it's funny. Kevin was actually the semifinalist for the National Defensive Player of the Year award, whereas DeJuan Harris, even though he won Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, was not a finalist or semifinalist for the Naismith Defensive Player of the Year. So that was kind of funny how that worked. Either way, you can't go wrong with whichever guy that you want to talk about. And I think both are excellent defenders and 2 of the top 5 defenders in the conference, and 2 of the best, 15, 10, 20, however you want to go, defenders in the entire country. So whoever you want to answer there, I think is a very great guess. Now, outside of that, who would be maybe the 3rd best defender on this team? I can't imagine anyone else will be as good as those players. If they are, you could have a legendary defense this year. I could actually see, it's funny with Hunter Dickinson coming in, part of the knock against him was, yeah, but how can he defend in space? How can he defend in pick and roll? I could actually see you coming away being like, yeah, but Hunter Dickinson is the third best defender on this team, because we do know Hunter Dickinson is a very good positional defender. Like if you try to post him up, get him on the block, he is a good center one-on-one defender. The big question becomes, how is he going to defend in space? I think with Bill Self, with his scheme, probably running a drop coverage, certain things they're going to do against ball screens that they did with David McCormick, who, is Hunter Dickinson any less mobile than David McCormick, who was having to deal with like an injured foot throughout his last couple years at KU? I don't know, probably not. So maybe you can mitigate some of the quote unquote weaknesses there for defending in space. And if he is a pretty good shot blocker, like, rim protection wise, shot blocking numbers are similar, if not better than like David McCormick. And he is a good one-on-one defender. Maybe he could end up being a solid defender for you this season. But I guess if you do want to bring in the questions about defending in space, like maybe that would eliminate him there. Arterio Morris is someone I expect to pressure the ball very well. He's very athletic. He's got good length for kind of point guard type. So, maybe that's somebody who could be that. Elmarco Jackson, very athletic, very lengthy. Maybe he could be that. Also, though, with Elmarco, it's probably not like, even guys who come in as really good athletes as freshmen can struggle defensively because there are a lot of things you have to learn. And like Grady Dick, for instance, was a good athlete, had good length, and I thought he tried hard, but it takes time to get to know on that end of the floor. Like Andrew Wiggins was a pretty good defender at KU, but there were still times he would fall asleep off the ball. There's still little things that you have to learn in the college game. So that wouldn't be my pick, but he has the potential to do it. KJ Adams is somebody who he's athletic as all get up. He's got all the length in the world. Now he's going to be better off if anybody tries to take him in the post. If he's guarding fours, that ain't going to work as well as it did with fives. And to be clear, he was actually pretty good defending fives inside, especially given up the size that he did there. Question is going to be, can he keep up more consistently with guards if he's switching on to them? But he has all the potential in the athletic makeup that he could be that guy. So I think if I was going with that number 3 guy, honestly, I'd probably go Arterio Morris. I think he's going to be great at ball pressure, but I'd be cool KJ Adams. Either way, if we're talking about here, you have elite defenders in Kevin McCullough and Dajuan Harris. I think you'll have plus defenders, or at least above average defenders, in Arterio Morris and KJ Adams. And then you'll have, to me, at least like average defenders in Hunter Dickinson and Elmarco Jackson. You have all the makings of being an elite defensive team. Like this is all the makings of, you had Bill Self in there too with his game planning, his scheming, what he can do for defense. This to me feels like a very clear top 20 defense, probably top 15 defense, top 10 defense maybe, and with even the possibility of being like a top 5 defense. You go back to the national title team 2 years ago, they were around the 20-25 range headed into the tournament. They ended up being like a top 15, top 20 defense once all things were said and done. I think this defense is going to be better than that one because you have Dajuan and Kevin kind of leading the way there. Can the offense live up to where that one is? I don't know. That's the part where it kind of remains to be seen. But this should be a very, very good defense, and you have a lot of good options to kind of go to. What about players that could be picked on the defensive side of the ball? Who would be maybe some of more of your concerns on the defensive end? We'll get to those players coming up in just a moment. First, though, this episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. We're constantly looking for people at the radio station to work, run board on certain stuff, come in part-time. Things get so much easier with LinkedIn Jobs because a lot of people have LinkedIn and it's super easy for people to apply, which if it's super easy for people to apply, it's seen, then you're going to get more qualified candidates and it's going to be easier to sift through the good ones and the ones that aren't going to be great fits. Add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. You want to add the right team member, just like Kansas is looking to add, maybe that 11 scholarship player is going to fit in perfectly. Just like KU football scours the transfer portal in the winter, looking to add that final addition to round out the roster. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number 1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Keyword free. Terms and conditions apply. Who will be some of the players that maybe are going to have more defensive questions on this team here in 2023 to 24? I went through a lot of players there. I went through, I think, 6 players as part of the guys I mentioned who, your 2 at the top and then your other 4 would have a chance. If you do get in a specific matchup where you are on a stretch 5 or you are on a small ball team that has the ability for their 5-man to dribble, to space the floor, who's really athletic and can run up and down the court, then Hunter Dickinson, there becomes questions there. Can he defend that guy in space? Can he get out defensively and guard the 3-point line? Now, the beauty of what Kansas is running, if a team does have that in the 5-man, but the 4-man isn't as much that, they could just invert it and put KJ on the movable 5-man and put Hunter Dickinson on maybe a less, if the 4-man's not as good at shooting at the 5. So they can invert it a little bit, but what if you're playing, one of those teams that is more 4 or 5? And it's one of those things that, you look at some of the mid years of Bill Self, it was, you get to the NCAA tournament, like you think back to the Northern Iowa games where you're playing maybe more mid-majors and they have that stretch 4, stretch 5, and it gave you issues. But then against the bigger teams, you had no problems. This team feels like more in that, to where in the NCAA tournament in past years, because you played a more wing-heavy lineup, you haven't had as many troubles with teams that may stretch 4 or stretch 5. The wing teams are more matchup proof. This team has a chance to be dominant, but in that specific matchup in an NCAA tournament, that could become a little bit problematic. So that would be one thing that I would highlight. The other one here, and I don't mean to pick on people or whatever, because, whatever. Nick Timberlake, that hasn't been his strength defensively so far in his career. I'm just going back off the numbers. Synergy has him in the 4th percentile in defense last year. Not very good. Now, part of that, when you're the best player on your team and you're having to be counted on to score a ton and be the primary option on offense, and you exert so much energy on that end, it is hard to, have to use up as much energy on the defensive end of the floor. It just is. So with Nick Timberlake coming to Kansas, he's not going to be the guy who's firing up all of the shots like he was at Towson. He's going to fit a more specific role. Does that give him more energy and more effort to exert on the defensive end? Absolutely it does. So I actually am, even though you do have questions about, it's a jump up in competition. If you struggled defensively again at Towson in the CAA, doesn't that mean it's going to be worse in the Big 12? Well, athletically, yes, it's going to be worse, but because you're going to have the better role, and because you're going to have more required of you to get on the court to play well defensively, I think Nick Timberlake's defense will be better than what he showed last year. That said, better defense for Nick Timberlake might end up being below average defender in the Big 12. If he's hitting threes, if he's doing well on the offensive side of the ball, it doesn't matter. You have enough other good defenders that you're going to have insulation around him, that you're going to be able to make up for it, and that you're just going to want that offense. So it's not overly concerning, but that could be something that maybe hinders his playing time, right? Arterio Morris might end up starting over Nick Timberlake because, Timberlake might be the better shooter. I do think Morris is underrated as a shooter, but on the defensive side of the ball, Morris probably is ahead of Nick Timberlake, and Bill Self loves that. He trusts that. So that could limit Nick Timberlake's playing time. If he only ends up playing 10, 15 minutes, that could be why. Now, we also saw Isaiah Moss, who was, maybe a below average defender in his time at KU, be a starter by season's end on that team that, would have been the number 1 overall seed headed into the NCAA tournament. And that's just because they had such good defensive insulation around him with Doak and Garrett and Dotson that they just needed the 3-point shooting, and the defense, they were able to overcome it. That could be the case for Nick Timberlake this year too. So it's kind of interesting in that regard. But overall, this should be a very good defense. They have all the traits in the world to be a good 2-point defense. When you have a big man inside with Hunter Dickinson, a good ball pressuring team with Harris, Morris, Jackson, McCullough, a good team at forcing steals. McCullough and Harris are both good at that. And they should be good at rebounding. That is an unheralded part of the defensive side of the ball in terms of, obviously rebounding is not unheralded, but you don't necessarily attach it with defense. You know how you finish out a stop? You know how you actually get a stop? You grab the defensive rebound so you end the possession. Well, last year's team wasn't great at it, and neither was the team before, to be honest, but you should be pretty good at that this year. McCuller's a good defensive rebounder. I think KJ will be better at it this year. Hunter Dickinson's a really good defensive rebounder that you should be able to finish those out. The real question will be defending the three-point line, but that's usually the question with all teams and with Kansas teams under Bill Self in general, especially if there's a stretch team. But outside of that, there's a lot of things going the way of the defense. All right, I want to get to what to watch out for in KU's trip to Puerto Rico in just a second. First, though, Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit, or your money back. So that's great. You love to have that insurance. You don't get a money back in the transfer portal. Player comes and it doesn't work. You don't get to be like, hey, can we actually exchange for this transfer? That's how it works, though, at eBay Motors. That's great. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Ride eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply. What to watch out for KU's upcoming trip to Puerto Rico. They're going to be playing 3 games as part of the trip to Puerto Rico. The first, I believe they head down there on like August 1st or August 2nd, but the first game is on August 3rd. That'll be Thursday, August 3rd. They'll be playing at 11 a.m. Central Time. You can actually listen to the game on KLWN and 105.9 KISS in Lawrence. The 105.9 KISS signal stretches to Topeka and Kansas City too. Then they'll be playing again on Saturday at 4 p.m. Again, same thing goes. There will be a half-hour pregame and postgame on KLWN and 105.9 KISS. And then they'll be playing their third game on August 7th at 11 a.m. Again, half-hour pre-post on KLWN and 105.9 KISS through the Jayhawk radio network. And, when you look at this, it'll be interesting. The competition they're playing, it's a professional team. And then there's I believe the professional team is from Puerto Rico. And then there's the Bahamian for the Bahamas national team that there are players like Buddy Hield and DeAndre Ayton and like Klay Thompson, Michael Thompson, his brother, that are on the team. I don't know which of them is going to be playing, but if you get any of them or all of them playing, then it becomes a real test of being like, if you can play well against a team with those NBA stars, boy, would you walk away from that being like, wow, this team could be really good. Or if any individuals do well against, like if Hunter Dickinson did well against DeAndre Ayton, it'd be like, oh my gosh, this guy's unbelievable, right? But I think from holistic approach, how is the team playing around Hunter Dickinson and utilizing the 2 big lineups? With KJ, how is that working? I think KJ Adams in general is the player that people are most going to be excited to watch in this thing. Like, what does he look like not playing as a center and next to another center? Do we see more dribbling skills? Do we see more passing skills? Do we see his ability as a perimeter defender? Do we see some of his mid-range jump shooting ability? That'll be very interesting. Does KU play any other 2 big lineups with like Parker Brown or Zach Clements next to Hunter Dickinson? I think that overall is going to be the biggest thing, mainly once we go back to KJ Adams. How well do Arterio Morris and Elmarco Jackson shoot the basketball? That'll be a big question, and something that, it'll be a small sample size, so we won't be able to take away a ton. But if it looks good, better to look good than go like 0 for 9 or something like that. From a Bill Self perspective, how much tinkering and different lineups will we see early on versus Bill Self trusting guys? Once the ball gets rolled out, Bill Self loves to go with the guys he trusts. In a setting like this, though, he will give more leeway, but it still wouldn't surprise you if you still saw high minutes for the guys he trusts more. So we're going to be able to take away from that, possibly, and be like, okay, it's pretty clear who this is the guy. And to that regard, who's going to be the 5th starter? If we assume DeJuan Harris, Kevin McCullough, KJ Adams, Hunter Dickinson, will it be Arterio Morris? Will it be Elmarco Jackson? Will it be Nick Timberlake? Now, it could be different now than at the start of the year. Keep in mind, Arterio Morris has been having to deal with this court case stuff down in Austin, and that's caused him to maybe miss some time to where maybe Arterio starts game 1, but at this point in time, maybe Nick Timberlake or Elmarco Jackson's had more at the team that they start. But if Arterio's starting right now, that probably is pretty indicative of how much more Bill Self would trust him at this point in time. Who's the eighth guy is the other conversation. I think Parker Brown at this point in time, but maybe it will be Jamari McDowell. Those are all things that I'm going to be looking out for. And then just individual player performances. Does anyone step up? Does anyone add anything to their game? Does anyone look physically or athletically different or better? Or does the 3-point stroke look better on a player like Kevin McCullar? Little things like that, what we're going to be looking for. We won't be able to have overarching takeaways, but you can have more takeaways for this than you can the camp scrimmages or late night in the fog, because there's not coached up plays. There's not coached up schemes in those events. And your players are going at it against each other. So it's like, well, if this player does good, is it because he did well, or is it because your other player didn't do well? But in this event where you're playing other people, Bill Self's coaching you, you have certain schemes, you have certain plays you're running. Yes, it's not a full playbook from what you're going to get to the start of the season. This will be more indicative of the regular season than those other scrimmages that KU runs over the summer and once we get closer to the offseason will be. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. We'll be back next week, and we'll start doing our Monday through Friday thing again, so you'll be able to have everything every day. Thank you to all the everydayers out there. You can find us wherever you get any of your podcasts. You can hit me up on Twitter at Johnson Radio if you have something you think would be fun to talk about on the show. And that'll do it for us here. Don't forget to subscribe, like our page on YouTube page. Have a good one. See you next time with Locked On Jayhawks.